Morning, guys. It's time for chapter 13. When they reached the Jeep, Tende put the breakfast things in the cab and took out his rifle. They set off on foot across the valley. The sun was so searing that even the earth smelled baked. The sky was blue as the kingfisher's wing. At this hour of the day there was no shade to speak of, but the lacy leaf thorn trees were alive with bees, cooing doves, and crested gray lories, which her grandmother and Tende referred to as the go-away birds, because that's what they seemed to shout to potential predators. These were the sounds Martine had come to associate with Africa. I'll see if I can find a sound that says like that so you can see it. She stuck close to Tende, who walked with his hand on the trigger of his rifle, alert for elephants, buffaloes, and lions, and the most unpredictable animals in the reserve. He noticed everything. He showed Martine a nest of hoopty bird babies, a comical chameleon, and a spore of female leopards and two cubs. He could even tell how big the cubs were and how fast the little family had been traveling. The more Tende talked, the more obvious it had been that he knew Zimbabwe like he knew his own heart. Martine felt safe with him. With his gravelly voice and patient way of explaining things, he reminded her of her father. All at once Tende broke off. He made a clicking noise of irritation and took some pliers out of his pocket. They were in the valley to search for snares, wire nooses, or iron-jawed traps left by poachers, which strangled animals or broke their limbs and left them to die slowly. Martine watched him as he sprang a trap, almost invisible in the long grass, and cut the rusty wire binding to the tree. "I don't know what to do any more," he said as they walked into the welcome cool of the grove of trees. "No matter how many of these snares I remove, they are always there the next day. And recently we've started to lose our big game as well. A lion and a buffalo have disappeared in the last month. I wish we could employ a guard, but money is very tight." Listening to him, Martine began to feel frightened for Jeremiah. What if her giraffe, she's already began to think of Jeremiah as hers, had his legs broken in a steel trap? Tende? The Zulu put his finger to his lips, indicated that she should creep forward quietly and crouch with him behind a tree. They sat motionless. After a few minutes, a magnificent kudu bull stepped gracefully into the clearing in front of them and stood in the dappled sunlight. I'll find a video. He seemed to be listening for something. Martine thought that next to Jemmy, he was the most gorgeous animal she had ever seen. He had spiral horns and almond shape for eyes and a broad fawn-colored face. Long silky white fur traced the line of his throat, and delicate white stripes adorned his back, which humped at the shoulder. "He's amazing," she whispered to Tende, who grinned down at her. Bang! A bullet ripped into the tree trunk above Tende's head, simultaneously spraying him with splinters and terrifying Martine. Before they could move, a second bullet hit the kudu in the throat. Blood spurted from his neck in a fountain, and he dropped to the ground and lay still. Martine screamed. Alex came strolling through the trees, smoke rising from the tip of his rifle. His blond hair was standing up in sweaty spikes. "Sorry about that, guys," he said. "The sight on my gun's been playing up. Luckily I missed you, eh? I was trying to hit that kudu over there. From where I was, it looked like it was caught in a snare." Tende was enraged. "There was nothing wrong with that kudu, nothing," he shouted. "Where is the snare? What did you have to go and shoot it for?" "What can I say?" Alex musingly chirped. "These things happen. At least it'll make good eating." This incensed Tende even more, and the two men started to argue. Neither of them noticed Martine steal away and run as fast as she could to the fallen kudu. His eyes were glazed over, and his lovely fawn coat was scarlet with pulsing blood. The rifle blast had left a big, jagged hole in his white, bearded throat. Martine bent down beside him. She was in a trance, just as she had been when she held the wild goose. Ordinarily, she would have been inconsolable at the mere idea of anyone shooting an animal, but today she didn't feel sadness at all. Instead, she felt charged with energy, as if the purest, most perfect electricity in the world was coursing through her veins. Her hands became boiling hot. She put them over the kudu's heart, and there was a faint beat, already fading. Martine thought fast. Shock and loss of blood was what caused the kudu to lose consciousness, and she knew from the first aid her dad had taught her that without emergency treatment he would be dead in minutes. But that didn't mean he couldn't be saved. The bullet had pierced the kudu's throat, passed straight through his windpipe, and made a clean exit. If Martine could stem the blood and heal his failing heart, then maybe, just maybe, the kudu would breathe again. In the distance she heard Alex snap sarcastically. The trouble with you, Tende, is they always put settlement before business. A dead animal is not always a disaster, my friend. Sometimes it's a furry bit of money. Martine shut him out and put her hand over the hole in the kudu's throat. Blood bubbled through the gaps of her fingers. Every second counted. She scanned the area around her, desperately searching for something that could help seal the wound. There was nothing but pale dirt, tufts of dry grass, and a big anthill. The anthill! Martine had suddenly flashed back of Miss Volkner telling the class how the Shanagan tribe had once used solder termites, which had been very large mandible pinchers of death, to stitch up the wounds. That made it so effective. Miss Volkner told them was that the termite saliva worked as a natural antiseptic. The downside, she added, with what Martine had thought was unnecessary relish, is that after the soldiers have locked their jaws, you have to rip their bodies off. That way they won't be tempted to let go. Martine had been squeamish about the decapitation of the poor termite at the end, as she watched them making their way innocently home past her left knee, but she didn't feel any better about it now. But she also knew she had to save the kudu. The soldier termites were easy to spot. They had bulbous red heads on tiny cream bodies, and their black mandibles waved in the air like weapons. As quick as a flash, she brought the edges of the wound together in a neat line, grabbed a passing soldier by the non-biting end, and held its pinchers to the pink flesh. It clamped down hard. Before she could think about it, Martine whipped off its rear. It worked. The soldier's black mandibles curved into Kudu's skin exactly like a stitch. She picked up another termite and did the same thing again, telling herself that at least it had died for a good cause. It hadn't been stepped on by mistake or something. In another minute 20 termite heads sealed the wound as tightly as any surgeon could have done. Not a trickle of blood escaped. Martine placed her hot hands over the Kudu's dying heart and began pressing down every few seconds. Under her touch the beat grew stronger and the Kudu's skin became warmer. When he opened his eyes he saw Martine. He appeared confused, but not frightened. He climbed to his feet shakily and with a flick of his tail bounded weakly away. She watched him go, flooded with an indescribable feeling of joy. All she could think of was, Dad would have been proud of me. That's when she realized, somehow without noticing it, she was finding her feet in a new world, and because of that, happiness was creeping up on her again. 3 times in the last few weeks, saving the Egyptian goose, finding Jemmy, and now healing the Kudu, she had to do things on her own with no one else's help, even when she was very, very scared. And each time something amazing had happened, and that made her trust herself once more. Even so, she was scared to look at the 2 men in case they'd witness what had just taken place. Fortunately, it seemed they hadn't. Alex had his back to her, and Tende's view was blocked by the game warden's body. They were still arguing. She used a tuft of grass and some spit to wipe the blood off her hands and walked over to them. Kudu's gone, she announced casually. The men stopped ranting and stared at the spot where the Kudu had been. Tende rubbed his eyes. He went a funny gray color. His gaze went from Martine to the clearing, then back again. Where's the Kudu? Marked Alex. Where's the Kudu? It was dead. How could it have moved? He felt better, said Martine. He decided that it wasn't a great idea to hang around while the sight of your gun isn't working. Alex made a move toward her as if he was going to throttle her with her bare hands. You again? He snarled. Remember what I told you. Be very careful. Next time you might not be so lucky. He turned to Tende. As for you, just for the record, you should know that it's not the new South Africa on this game reserve anymore. He picked up his gun and stormed off into the trees. Martine waited until she heard his truck speeding away. He could have killed you, she said. The Zulu was sitting on the ground with his head in his hands. There were 2 ugly gashes in his face, caused by the ricocheting splinters. He lifted his head. Please don't say anything to your grandmother. He didn't want to distress her unnecessarily. Tende, please? Okay, Martine agreed unhappily. Then they were silent for a minute. Then Tende said, My aunt was right, wasn't she, little one? You have a gift. Martine didn't answer. The Koodoo, persisted Tende. It was dying. What did you do to it? It was resting, said Martine. The Koodoo was just resting. And with that, Tende had to be satisfied.